Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. Ethan never liked surprises, but life had a cruel way of delivering them anyway. It started with a photo, one that he hadn't gone looking for, one that he stumbled upon almost by accident. A lazy Sunday afternoon, a casual scroll through a travel blog he'd been following for years. And then there it was, a promotional post from a luxury resort in Belize, filled with smiling faces and bright skies. The resort was advertising its new couples package, and among the many laughing guests caught mid-moment in the photo collage, Ethan saw her, Madeline, his wife. At first, he thought it was just someone who looked like her. That was possible, wasn't it? Plenty of brunettes in the world. But then he saw the dress, the pale blue sundress with the floral stitching she'd bought last spring, the one she claimed she'd never worn because it didn't fit right. She was wearing it in the photo, clearly comfortable, her hair pulled up in the way she only did when she didn't want it getting in her way on warm days. And she wasn't alone. The man beside her, tall, muscular, tanned, had his hand on the small of her back. The way they were standing, shoulder to shoulder, heads tilted toward each other as if sharing a private joke, left little room for doubt. Ethan stared at the image for what felt like hours. The smiles, the body language, the closeness. It said more than words ever could. Madeline had told him she was going on a solo spa retreat, a few days to herself to relax, recharge, and unwind. She needed space, she said. Ethan had agreed, even encouraged it. They'd both been under stress. His job at the law firm had demanded late nights and long weekends. He thought she just needed some peace. He had no idea she'd been lying. That night, he didn't confront her. She returned from the trip with a glow he hadn't seen in years and a few new scarves he pretended to admire. She hugged him longer than usual, kissed his cheek, and asked if he'd missed her. Ethan said he had and meant it. She smiled. He smiled. And deep down, a storm started to build. Ethan was a patient man. He had learned to be one, through school, through long court cases, through life. He didn't act without thinking. So instead of exploding, he began watching. He waited until she left the house the next morning, claiming she had brunch with her cousin. Then he opened her laptop. She was careless with her passwords. Everything was saved. Her email inbox was a mess of promotions, newsletters, and forwarded jokes. But tucked inside was a series of messages with a sender named R. At first, they seemed innocuous. Lines like, "Can't wait to see you again," and "Last week was magic." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He read further. There were reservations, confirmations of private dinners, and even a shared online folder with photos from the resort, ones far more intimate than the promotional image he'd seen. And then he found something else, a scanned document. It was a prenup amendment, one he didn't remember signing. But there it was, his signature, hers, and a notary stamp. According to the file, Madeline was now entitled to a substantial portion of his inheritance, the one his grandfather had left him, and that had remained untouched in a trust. He clicked through more documents and found emails between Madeline and an attorney, one he didn't know. They were discussing timelines, asset transfers, and even something that made his blood run cold, finalizing the exit plan. Exit plan. Ethan closed the laptop slowly. She wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave him and take everything with her. The betrayal stung. But more than that, he felt foolish. He had loved her, trusted her. They'd been married 7 years. There had been good times, hard times, promises whispered in the dark. All of it now felt like an illusion, a performance. He sat in silence for a long time. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, and a few birds chirped without a care in the world. Ethan felt like a statue in his own living room. When Madeline came home that afternoon, he was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She kissed his cheek again, asked about his day, and went upstairs to shower. Everything looked normal on the surface, but underneath, a silent war had begun. Ethan started keeping a journal. Not a digital one. He wasn't going to risk her finding it. a small leather notebook he kept hidden in his office drawer. He wrote down dates, names, locations. Every time she left the house, he noted it. When she returned, he asked casual questions. He was careful not to raise suspicion. He didn't want her to know he knew. And he started collecting more evidence. He hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone thorough. Within days, the investigator returned with photos. Madeline meeting R at a downtown hotel. Madeline withdrawing cash from their joint account. Madeline meeting the same unknown lawyer from the email thread at a coffee shop in the city. Ethan filed everything, photos, bank statements, copies of emails, into a secure folder on a flash drive he carried with him everywhere. His life had turned into a chess game, and he was planning his moves carefully. He began seeing a financial advisor in secret, someone who could help him move his inheritance into a separate, untouchable account. He also visited a lawyer friend from law school, unrelated to his firm, someone he trusted, and started laying the groundwork for a quiet legal counterstrike, one that would ensure Madeline walked away with nothing. It wasn't revenge he wanted. It was survival. He started sleeping in the guest room, claiming it was because of his snoring. Madeline didn't protest. She said it might be good for them to get some rest. Ethan agreed with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. One night, as she slept, he stood in the doorway of their bedroom and watched her. She looked peaceful, innocent. But Ethan now knew what lay beneath that calm surface. She was planning to rip his world apart. He couldn't let that happen. There was one final piece he needed: the confirmation of when. When she planned to leave, when the exit plan would be executed. And he didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, she received a phone call in the kitchen. She thought he was still outside mowing the lawn. Ethan stood just around the corner, listening. "It's all set," she whispered. "I'll tell him after the gala next weekend. I want it to be clean. I'll say we've grown apart, that it's not working. He won't fight me on it. He never does." Ethan's hand tightened on the doorframe. She was going to leave him after the gala. That gave him 1 week. 1 week to turn the tables. The next morning, Ethan kissed her forehead and told her he loved her. She smiled and said it back. But in his eyes, she didn't notice the change. He was no longer the man she thought he was. He was no longer playing defense. He was about to strike first. The week leading up to the gala passed in a blur, though Ethan moved through it with the calm precision of a man with a plan. On the surface, he was the same husband Madeline had always known. Gentle, attentive, even a little distracted. Beneath the surface, he was laying the final pieces of a careful, quiet strategy that had only one goal: protect everything he had built from the woman trying to take it away. He began with the inheritance. His financial advisor helped him restructure his accounts. The trust his grandfather had left him was still intact, but now it was shielded under a new legal structure, a family office setup, with oversight assigned to a third-party trustee. That meant even if Madeline tried to claim a portion of it through any loophole in the amended prenup, she would hit a wall. The money legally was no longer in his name, in the traditional sense. It was in the name of the family foundation, and she wasn't part of it. He also had his lawyer quietly file a formal motion to dispute the authenticity of the prenup amendment. The signature looked like his, yes, but he knew he never signed it. The motion would trigger a delay in any divorce proceedings tied to that document. It wouldn't be visible in public records until after the filing was processed. By then, it would be too late for Madeline to pivot. Meanwhile, the investigator continued delivering reports like clockwork. More photos, more meetings. Madeline wasn't being discreet anymore. She had grown confident. Too confident. She believed Ethan was blind to it all, too busy with work, and too trusting to question her long absences. She didn't realize she was walking into a trap of her own making. The night of the gala arrived. Madeline looked stunning. Ethan couldn't deny that. She wore a crimson gown with a low back, her dark hair swept up into a graceful twist. She kissed his cheek before they left the house and smiled for every picture taken at the event. Friends and colleagues complimented them all night. What a lovely couple. What a perfect match. What grace they carried. But behind every smile, Ethan saw the truth, and it no longer hurt. Now, it just confirmed what he had to do. Madeline was waiting until after the gala to tell him. He could see it in her eyes, the way she touched his arm gently when they were around others, the long, almost sorrowful glances when she thought he wasn't paying attention. She was preparing to deliver the final blow with a gentle tone and soft words. She believed he would accept it quietly. She didn't know what was coming. The next morning, Ethan woke early. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his notebook. He reviewed his checklist. The financial restructuring was done. The legal dispute was filed. The investigator's final report had arrived yesterday, complete with video evidence of Madeline's most recent meeting with R, whose full name was now known. Ryan Mitchell, an interior architect, Madeline had apparently met at a charity event nearly a year ago. They had been seeing each other for months, quietly at first, then more boldly. There were even mentions of starting over in some of the messages Ethan had copied. She was preparing to leave her marriage and take half of everything, including what didn't belong to her, to build a new life with Ryan. But Ethan wasn't going to let that happen. After breakfast, he asked Madeline if she wanted to take a walk with him. The weather was perfect, cool, crisp, with early signs of autumn in the air. She agreed, seemingly pleased by his sudden attentiveness. They walked through the neighborhood park, passing children on bicycles, couples with dogs, and old friends enjoying their retirement mornings. Ethan pointed out a tree they'd once picnicked under, and she smiled, clearly surprised by his memory. "You've been different lately," she said gently. "How so?" "Just more present, like when we first met." Ethan gave her a small smile. "Maybe I've just remembered what matters." She looked away, her expression conflicted. She was starting to feel guilty, he could see it. But guilt wouldn't stop what she was planning. That much he was sure of. That evening, she finally sat down with him. Her tone was soft, apologetic. "I've been thinking a lot," she began. "About us. About where we are." Ethan nodded, listening carefully. "I feel like we've been drifting for a while now. And I've tried, Ethan, I really have, but I think maybe we've reached the end of our road. I don't want this to be ugly. I still care about you. I just think we both deserve to be happy." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" She nodded, a mix of sadness and relief in her eyes. "Yes, I think it's the right thing for both of us." He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said nothing for a few seconds. "I appreciate your honesty," he finally said. "And I agree. If that's what you want, then we should move forward with it." She blinked, clearly surprised he wasn't arguing. "I already spoke with a lawyer," she admitted, "just to understand the process. I hope that's okay." "Of course," he said calmly. "Actually, I spoke with mine, too." Her expression flickered. "You did?" He nodded. "I wanted to be prepared, just in case. And I also found something interesting." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Ethan stood up and walked to the side table. He pulled out the flash drive from his pocket and placed it gently on the table. "This has everything I need to show a judge that this wasn't just a falling out. It was premeditated. The affair, the hidden meetings, the attempt to take my inheritance. I have recordings, emails, photos. Even that prenup amendment you forged." Madeline's face went pale. "I didn't forge—" "You did," he said, his voice even. "And the notary who supposedly witnessed it doesn't exist. My lawyer confirmed it. It's a fake document." She stared at him, stunned. "I gave you time to come clean, Madeline. I watched you plan this. I watched you prepare to destroy everything we built, everything I worked for. But I'm not letting that happen. Not now, not ever." She sat back in silence, her hands trembling slightly. "I've already moved my inheritance into a protected trust," Ethan continued. "And as for the divorce, I'll be filing officially tomorrow morning, with a request for the judge to review all of this. If you want a clean break, I suggest you cooperate. Because if this goes to court, the consequences for fraud could follow you for a very long time." Madeline's eyes welled up, but Ethan wasn't moved. "Not anymore." "I don't want revenge," he said quietly, "but I will protect what's mine." She didn't argue. Not that night, not the next day. When Ethan filed for divorce, he did so with everything in place: documentation, legal support, financial shielding. Madeline, stunned by the speed and precision of it all, had no room to fight back. Her lawyer advised her to settle. She agreed. It was quiet, clean, just as she had wanted. But it wasn't on her terms. Ethan walked away not just with his inheritance intact, but with his dignity, his freedom, and the knowledge that he had refused to be played. Still, something lingered deep within him. Not bitterness, not rage. Something quieter, a bruise where trust used to be, a shadow that reminded him love, no matter how beautiful, could sometimes be the most dangerous disguise of all. He didn't look back, but he wasn't finished yet. 3 months had passed since the divorce papers were signed. The house was quieter now. Ethan had stayed in the home as per the terms of the settlement. Madeline had moved into a small apartment across town. They hadn't spoken since the final hearing. She had tried once, sent a message saying she hoped they could one day be friends, maybe have closure. Ethan never responded. There was nothing left to say. He'd won the legal battle. The forged prenup was dismissed. His inheritance remained untouched. The judge had made it clear in his ruling. Madeline's actions had consequences, and she was lucky Ethan hadn't pursued criminal charges for fraud. The investigator's file had left no room for argument, and yet, even with the victory, Ethan didn't feel like a man celebrating. There were no parties, no calls to friends boasting of what he'd uncovered. What he felt more than anything was relief. Relief that it was over. But not everything had settled. The final report from the private investigator had included something Ethan hadn't expected. A quiet tip, buried in a side note. A transfer of funds between Madeline and Ryan Mitchell, just under $10,000, labeled as a consultation fee. Ethan had brushed it off at first. It could have been anything. But then another appeared, this time $18,000, then $25,000, all from Madeline, all to Ryan, all after the divorce was finalized. Curiosity had turned to suspicion. Ethan asked the investigator to take one final look. What he found painted a different picture than Ethan had anticipated. Ryan wasn't just an affair partner. He was also something else. Someone who had a history of attaching himself to women with assets, charming them and then slowly draining them, emotionally and financially. Nothing ever provable enough for charges, but there were patterns, court records, small claims, discreet complaints. It seemed Madeline wasn't just betraying Ethan. She was also being deceived. Ethan didn't feel sorry for her, exactly. But it did feel ironic. Here was a woman who had tried to manipulate a man out of his wealth, only to find herself entangled with someone doing the very same thing to her. Ryan had vanished from her life just weeks after the last large transfer. His number disconnected, his social media gone, his name scrubbed from any professional sites. Madeline, it seemed, had fallen for the illusion she once used herself. Ethan learned all of this quietly, privately. He didn't tell anyone, didn't gloat. But something inside him shifted after that. Some lingering weight finally loosened. He hadn't just escaped a marriage filled with lies. He'd sidestepped a trap she didn't even realize she was in. The months moved on. Slowly but steadily, life rebuilt itself. Ethan returned to his work, poured his energy into projects he'd put off. He reconnected with a few friends he had unintentionally distanced himself from during the marriage. There were long walks, books he hadn't had time to read, even a short trip to a mountain cabin by himself, where he sat under the stars with a fire burning and finally exhaled everything he'd been holding in. One day in late spring, he received a letter. It was from Madeline, handwritten, not typed, no return address. Just a simple envelope, inside of which was a note, only a page long. Ethan, it began. By the time you read this, I'll probably have moved again. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I made choices I'll regret for the rest of my life. I don't even know if I was in love with Ryan, or just in love with the idea of starting over, of feeling wanted again. But none of that justifies what I did to you. You were good to me, better than I ever deserved. And I broke that trust. You didn't deserve any of it. I see that now. If you ever think of me, I hope you remember not who I became, but who I was at the beginning, before I let greed and confusion change me. I'm sorry. Madeline. Ethan read it once, then again. He didn't feel rage. Not anymore. There was sadness, sure, but mostly there was closure. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and didn't respond. There was no point in holding on to what was already gone. Later that year, he met someone new, not in a grand, cinematic way. She wasn't someone he chased or fell for instantly. It was slow, natural. Her name was Claire. She worked with a nonprofit that helped veterans transition into civilian life. They met at a local fundraiser, shared a drink, laughed about how awkward those events could be. What drew Ethan to her wasn't her charm or beauty. Though she had both, it was her honesty. She was direct, open, real in a way he hadn't experienced in a long time. He didn't rush things. He didn't let the past taint something new. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope again. Hope that love didn't have to come wrapped in secrets. Hope that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, not with the same person, but with someone who respected it like it mattered. One night, sitting by the fire in his living room with Claire beside him, she asked him if he'd ever been married. He nodded. Yeah, it ended badly. She didn't push, just nodded. You seem like someone who learned something from it. I did, he said. I learned that silence isn't peace, and loyalty isn't love. Claire gave him a small, thoughtful smile. And now? Now, I know what to look for, and what to walk away from. She rested her head on his shoulder, and the room was quiet. Not the kind of quiet filled with tension or secrets, but the kind that feels safe. And for the first time in a long, long while, Ethan felt whole again. The past hadn't broken him. It had prepared him for something better, something real. And he wasn't looking back anymore. He didn't need to. The storm had passed, and the future finally was his to write.